Tag TV, and Tag Radio, rapidly becoming the leading technology new media in all of Georgia and the Southeast. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by Integrated Learning Services, integratedlearningservices.com. Wait, worry, or take control. At integratedlearningservices.com, increase sales, productivity, and client retention. Lower training costs. integratedlearningservices.com. A sense of identity and place, a history of innovation so vast and accomplished that it has become the very fabric of our technology industry's DNA in Georgia. The Technology Hall of Fame, established in 1993, recognizes the accomplishments of outstanding members of Georgia's technology's history and community, giants of a pioneering era that have helped shape, build, and develop a world-class technology industry in our state. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, March 30th, 2010, 1 week from the historic Georgia Technology Summit, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. A highlight of the 2010 summit was the 2009 inductee ceremonies for the Technology Hall of Fame winner of the year's prestigious award. It was engineer, entrepreneur, technology leader, visionary, community activist, and Eagle Boy Scout, Atlanta's very own Ken Byers, president of the nationally recognized firm of Byers Engineering. Tino speaks with the new Hall of Fame inductee in the afterglow of his impressive ceremonies at the summit event last week, where many of his fellow Hall of Famers attended, along with industry and academic leaders, to honor a very unique and very special man, Kenneth G. Byers, Jr., founder and president of Byers Engineering and the 2009 Technology Hall of Fame inductee.
Ken, thank you for joining me on Tech Talk.
You're welcome, Tina. I'm looking forward to it.
So let's get started. I think a lot of our listeners, first of all, let me take a step back and just congratulate you on being the Hall of Fame recipient. I think certainly we were all impressed and honored to have you be the newest recipient of the Hall of Fame award.
I'm so honored. I'm still walking on air from last week.
Well, I think a lot of our listeners, some of them who came to the summit and certainly many that did not get a chance, would like to learn a little bit more about you. So it's always good to begin at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about what your influences, what influenced you to go towards the career that you ultimately took on.
Well, I look back at it after all these years, and I think it first started with me becoming a Boy Scout, and I've always been achievement oriented, and I just really took to the Boy Scouts of America and became an Eagle Scout before I was 14 years old. I love the whole thing about that program. In fact, I still like to think that I run our firm with the 12 principles of the Boy Scout law: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I didn't read that. I've got that memorized.
Very good.
That's a great way to do any kind of business. So became an Eagle early, finished a lot of those programs, and about the time I was finishing my stint as a Boy Scout, I discovered this hobby, amateur radio. They call it ham radio. This is using shortwave radio sets to communicate around the world, and that really piqued my interest, not so much from building the sets and hanging antennas, but from operating them. I love the competition and the achievement part of it, of talking to people all around the world and getting into competitions and contests. And from that, as I was going through high school, I started thinking, well, what am I going to do for colleges, for universities? And since I lived in Atlanta, the natural thing would be to apply to Georgia Tech and study electrical engineering.
Well, as a sidebar here, I remember when I was growing up, my next door neighbor, a good friend of mine, he ended up actually being a punter for the New York Giants, which has nothing to do about what I'm going to say, but his dad had a ham radio, and we used to go over there and get on that and communicate with people around the world, which was a lot of fun. And is that still a pretty active hobby for a lot of people?
There are over 1 million people in the world still doing it.
Wow.
A lot of people think that because of the Internet and video games and whatnot, that the younger people are not getting into the hobby like they used to be, and that's somewhat true, but really the Internet and other technologies like bouncing signals off the moon or off of satellites, are still keeping the hobby very vibrant. And I even played with my set over this last weekend and listened to signals around the world. And so, yeah, it's pretty strong.
Very interesting. Over 1 million people. Wow.
Yeah. Most of those are in the U.S. and Japan, but then they're hand-scattered all over the world.
So you went to Georgia Tech, graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, and how did you then move to Byers Engineering Company?
Well, there's a little more to that, too. To go to Georgia Tech, I had to work my way through. So because my family were middle-income people, but there were 3 brothers, and we all had to get ourselves through university. So I got a job with Southern Bell here in Atlanta as a co-op student, where you go to school a quarter and you work a quarter. And that's how I discovered network engineering, what the telephone companies call outside plant engineering. That's all their cable in between their switching offices and their customers. So I was able to do that as I was working on my degrees. And as I was finishing that, I thought, well, what's the next thing to do? Get a master's degree, so I did that as well. And I'm getting to your question of
No, keep going.
Business.
This is good.
But so I got my master's degree. I told you I've always been achievement-oriented, and then after the master's degree, I thought, well, next thing after the master's, get a PhD, right? So I sat for some of the preliminary exams but did not study and fell flat on my face. I couldn't even understand the questions, much less figure out how to answer them. So I never will forget a moment in my life walking back to my apartment after the exam saying, well, Byers, you're not going to be a doctor, Ken Byers. You're going to have to excel with your master's degree. But that really helped me. And by the way, I love saying this. I said this the other day. A good friend of mine, he happens to be one of the Byers professors at Georgia Tech, John Chrysler, wrote a book that I just read, Silicon Earth. And I would recommend that to anybody. It's about nanotechnology, microtechnology, electronics, but written somewhat in layman's terms, although he threw a bunch of calculus equations in there that I was clueless with. But he defined electrical engineering or electrical and computer engineering, and I think it's just a neat definition. It is the manipulation of electrons for useful ends. And I thought that's a great description, not only for maybe electrical engineering, but all engineering is to use sciences to develop very useful ends for mankind.
And what's the name of the book again, just so our listeners pick that up?
Pretty simple, Silicon Earth.
Okay.
It's a pretty good book to read. There are parts in there that any of us could understand.
Very good.
So then I did that, and then since I couldn't get a PhD, I got an MBA at Georgia State. And that influenced me greatly, too, because it was about the time I decided to start my firm, and I even designed the chart of accounts for our accounting system, which we're still using today, and I got that from the accounting course way back at Georgia State. And then right at the beginning of my firm, I took an entrepreneur course there, and turns out that I had almost the ideal profile to be an entrepreneur. So that was kind of good reinforcement that I would do a good job opening the firm. So then I did open the firm in 1971. It's Byers Engineering Company. And we do technical services, and we produce software products for our clients, which are mostly utilities, and then even more, mostly telephone companies.
Well, I know the company's grown over the 39 years, and I read that you have had up to 1,400 employees. Is that right?
We did, but being an entrepreneur, I do some deals, and in 1998, I sold a unit that had 900 employees in it. It was something that we'd gotten into through our engineering work, and that was locating underground utilities for clients around the country. That was not really engineering work, and it was not really developing software, so we spun that out. So 900 employees went with that, but we're back up to 1,000 employees now, and nationwide from New England out to California.
Have you stayed with your core business, say, for the last 10 years, or are you always looking for ways to kind of press the envelope and do different things, or is it, people know when they call you or Byers Engineering, what they can expect in terms of your core competencies?
That's a good question. There are two answers to that. I'd like to say that we stick to our knitting, but our knitting changes over the years as technology changes. We're not doing the same today that we did when we started the firm in 1971. In fact, that's a good segue that when we started the firm, we were just using calculators. And then in the early 70s, there was no such thing as PCs then. We got our first hobbyist PC in about 1978. Then we started buying mini computers. These were the big $500,000 at a pop guys.
Right.
But within 5 years after that, we decided that we could develop our own software, which is how we got in the software business, to use PCs. And so we're using PCs now. In fact, about everybody in the firm has a PC at their desk. And that's a long way from just using calculators 39 years ago.
Right, but you did pull out a slide rule, Ken, at the
I was doing that
the summit. No need to use that anymore?
I still have it, though.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. I always have a good time doing that. So when I was at Tech. At Tech, we didn't even have calculators. That's what we used to engineer these slide rules.
Yeah.
And I made a point the other day, which I really think is fun, too. My firm is 39 years old, and we've gone from calculators to PCs on everybody's desk. These PCs, including software, could run several $1,000s. I read the other day, just showing you what technology is doing with Moore's Law, although there's got to be a physical limit to Moore's Law, but because we're getting already down to the smallest particles that science can measure. But 39 years from now, someone said that a $1,000 computer in the year 2049 will have the computational capacity of the entire human species. So
yeah, it's amazing going from calculators to computers, and then where it's going to head from there. Well, let's move kind of beyond Byers Engineering back to you and your personal interests. Certainly, the Hall of Fame committee, which is made up of past Hall of Fame winners, look for well-rounded individuals, people that do more than run their business and build their business. And you've done a lot. I know that you have a number of things that you do with Georgia Tech, but how about if you tell our listeners a little bit about your interests outside of Byers?
Okay, but speaking of Byers, I'd like to put a plug in for my three senior colleagues in the firm, Alan Robertson, Tim Parker, and Denise Dimick. Tim and Alan are presidents of our two divisions, the engineering division and the software product and data services division, and Denise is our CFO, and those are just great colleagues to have with the firm. They were there the other day at the induction ceremony.
Well, it's good to have that strong team. I know that you agree. I feel the same way, that you need to have some strong people surrounding you to grow anything. So.
Well, and we are a people business for the most part, too. In fact, technology, sure, you push electrons around, but you also, the industry, like any business, is a very people-oriented business, just like your organization, TAG. That is made up of individuals, and it's a huge organization, but it's because people like to network with each other. So technology is a lot more than just electrons.
That's for sure.
And then I like to think I'm more than an engineering nerd. In fact, someone said the other day, it kind of shocked me because I didn't think about it. He said, I'm sort of a rare combination in that I am an engineer at heart, but I do have a lot of diverse interests that I'm active in. One sure is ham radio, and I like to compete in that, but I'm also very active in interest in athletics, particularly running and tennis. I'm active in the Atlanta Lyric Theater. It's a musical theater company that we really enjoy. I love to travel. I just went to my 85th country last week.
Oh, wow.
My goal is to get to 100 countries. And then, I've been active in nonprofits, which I think really broadens your career. In fact, since I have not had a promotion in my company in 39 years.
Right.
I started out being the president. I'm still the president. I still have the same title. But the way I try to grow is to join these other great organizations and really go to school watching other people manage, particularly these very prestigious organizations. I'm a member of the Georgia Tech Foundation, the Carter Center, the Atlanta Rotary Club. I'm always taking notes on how leadership styles. So I really enjoy doing all that.
Well, I'm sure you've made, as you learn, you've made a great impact on the community as well, and one of the reasons you got the award. So we're just about out of time, but I think a good way to end our conversation is just to hear a little bit from you on entrepreneurship and your feelings about entrepreneurship when you started out, maybe starting this business 39 years ago, to how you see entrepreneurship today, and any advice for those that are looking to start a business or maybe are just getting started and not seeing the revenue come in yet. So thoughts on that?
Well, it's one of my favorite subjects. When I first started out, 1971, I took that course at Georgia State. It was the first time they'd ever taught the course on it. Now it's quite an academic discipline, entrepreneurship. In fact, my little brother at Stanford has probably the best center in the world on entrepreneurship, and he's written a book on it. So I pay attention to it, but I don't think the basic principles have changed at all in the last 39 or 40 years. There's just a lot more that's written about it. And one of my favorite topics I like to say is entrepreneurs are not risk takers. Everyone thinks an entrepreneur is a gambler. They're going to go out and take these huge risks, and that's the way they're perceived. But the fact is, if you study a true entrepreneur, they do not take risks that they think are risk. They're very safe, and they will only do something if they have enough self-confidence or control over the situation that they are pretty sure they're going to succeed. I will give an example personally. I've never bought a lottery ticket. I don't bet on Georgia Tech with the bookies. I've never played a slot machine. I have no control over that, and I'm just not going to take that risk. That's like throwing money away. But if someone in the firm comes and says they want to develop a new software product and we think that we'll make a good go at it, darn right I'm going to do that. Or if we want to open up a new profit center and say we just did one in Kansas, or Kansas is a good example, just end of last year. And I think that's going to be successful. Darn right I'm going to do that. I don't even consider that a risk. Other people might say, why are you going to spend all that development money on something you don't know it's going to succeed? Well, I think it's going to succeed. So, and then from a personal side, I will bet on shooting a game of pool. Because, but the point there is I have control on the outcome. Sure, it's risky, but I have control on the outcome. Same on, say, betting on a game of tennis. But
so it's calculated.
Difference. It's calculated, yeah, and there's a certain amount of confidence or control there that you can control the outcome. So I think anyone who has the confidence and has a great concept, if they think they can succeed at it, absolutely go for it, because you're sure not going to succeed if you don't try.
Well, Ken, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on Tech Talk, and congratulations one more time on the Hall of Fame Award.
Well, thank you so much for the interest, Tina.